Well, hello again and welcome to a new video. In this video, we are going to be talking about the Linux permissions. And we're going to try to understand what is permission and how is it important. Now, I'll be honest, the example that is used by the PowerPoint file, the book that we're using, is a perfect example to show you how important it is to understand what is permission and how is it affecting the performance of the system. Now, before we jump into everything, you need to know that every single user will have what we call a user ID, UID, okay? So this Linux server that we are using currently, we have many users, many faculties, many technicians, many students. Every single student will have his own user ID. Now, there is one special user ID, a user is called the root. Now the root, you can think about him as the owner of the whole system, and that owner usually have permission to do everything in the system. We, regular users, we simply are restricted with permissions for operations that we can implement on the system. And we're going to go through an example right now just to show you how important it is to understand how this permission system simply works. Now, we know that there's a file in the Linux operating system where your personal information as a user is simply listed there. And to have access to that file, it's simply, it's a text file. So if I want to have access to that file, it's called etc passwd. Now after I'm going to press this, you will see information related to every single user in this system. And here we go. It's a very, very long list. Now, if I'm supposed to be somewhere here, okay, I can search for it manually if I want to, but again, we have another way to do that. Grep ljanab. I'm going to look for my name and then etc passwd. And you can see here, this is my record. Now, in my record, let me just go ahead and break down what you're seeing here. And to start with, the first thing here is my username. An X here represents my password. Now, of course, I can guarantee you that my password is not X. But again, it's just listed as X here. Now, also, there are those two numbers. The first one is my user ID. So this is how I am presented to the system, and this is the group ID, the group that I belong to, that also has an ID. Now, I'm pretty sure, but again, I cannot guarantee that 100%, but I'm pretty sure I'm a member of a group in this system, and that group simply is the faculty group, where all the faculties are simply are going to be grouped together with the one group ID. Now, we will be given permissions that are different than you as a student, for example. So I have my own ID, and I'm a member of a group, and this is the group ID. Now after that, you will see my account information. So you'll see my name, as you can see here, my full name. This is my home directory, and this is the location of the bash that is associated with my operating system. With my account. So it's very, very obvious, very simple, very easy. You can see this here. And of course, you can just go ahead and grep and put your username, and you should be able to see the information related to your account. And a quick look at the group IDs in this system, you would notice there's a lot of 1007. And I have a good feeling that this could be the student's group ID. I cannot guarantee that, but later we're going to see that and we're going to have a look at it. Anyway, the question is password. Now, if I want to have access to that password, now, that is going to be a big problem because let me just tell you something. All the passwords are simply stored in a file in the system. And just like how I was able to have access to my account information, there is a file that contains the password of all the users, and that password file is simply called shadow, and the shadow file is located in etc. So if I go ahead, let me just show you what's going to happen. If I go type cat etc shadow, I want you to pay attention to the message that's going to be popping. Very, very important. Permission denied. This example here shows you how important is this whole permission system is. Now you may ask, who will have access then to that file? I'll tell you. The only one who can have access to that is simply the root. Okay, and I'm going to navigate later on to show you exactly the details of that. But in general, again, critical information like this one, again, as a user, I'm not supposed to be able to have access to it. I'm not supposed to know what's your username. And well, I can know your username. That's not a problem. But I'm not supposed to know what's your password. Okay? This is type of information that are critical and it should be secured. And again, this is what permission is all about. Is simply to restrict access, executing, reading, writing to files. Now, just to give you an idea here, let's go ahead and navigate and move to this. If I say change directory, I need to get out from my current directory, and then after that etc, and then let's see if I can go there. Now I'm in, if I type ls, and I will say shadow. Let's put some details. L, and here it is. Oh, look at that. My bad. I thought the root has a permission to have access to that file, and even the root doesn't have that permission. Okay? I'm going to talk about this command and what you're seeing here in a sec, but I was just trying to see, because I thought, again, in my idea, I thought that the root should be able to have access to anything, but here in this case, in the Linux system that we're using right now, again, I've been a root user for many Linux operating systems before, and I was able to have access, but the server that we're using currently here, even the root doesn't have access to the shadow file. Anyway, so this example here that I just showed you is only to show you how important it is to have this this permission system that simply will decide who will have access and who will not have access. And we are going to see later, how do we modify, how do we change those type of permissions, of course, if you actually have the permission to apply those changes and to start with. Okay, now before we jump into that, we should know a little bit of information about groups. As I said, every single, like in any operating system, just like how we can have multiple users, we can have multiple groups, and groups could have members in those groups, and every single group will be identified with an ID. Different operating systems handle groups in a different way. If you want to have access to the groups that are available in this system, you can have access to them by typing etc. Well, I'm still in the etc. So if I just say cat groups, and you will see those are all the groups that are available in the system. There's a group that I am the only member on it here. Anyway, so those are groups that are created and are available in this Linux operating system. Let's see. If I want to have access to one specific group, let's say the faculty group, this is like the grep faculty, and then I'll say group, and here we go. This is the faculty group. Look what we have in the faculty group. And of course, if I look for it, I should be able to find it. Where's faculty group? Here is faculty group. And here's student group. So I'm pretty sure if you look for your name, you'll find it here somewhere. Anyway, if you look at the faculty group, you will find the following number, the name of the group, the password of the group also here. But usually we don't use that much. And the name, the ID of the group. And after that, simply you will find all the members of that group. And those are the faculties of Johnson County Community College who have access to this Linux operating system. Okay? Now again, you may ask, why is this important? Because, and let me just explain that here right now very clear. Every single file and directory that you will have in Linux operating system, there will be permissions assigned to that file or directory. And those permissions varies depending on if you're talking about a user, or you're talking about a group, or if you're talking about everyone else in the system. So some permissions could be given to the owner of the file and directory, and some other permission could be given to a group of people to handle one file or directory, and some other permissions will be given to everyone else. Okay? And that's why it's important to understand this concept of permission. We have user, the owner of the file or directory, and we also have groups that can have some certain permission to handle files, and we also have the third option, which is if it's not a person, if it's not a group, it's simply everyone else. Okay? Now, there's another way to have access to the groups. We can just type groups, and that should give us the same information. So let me clear, just like I did, let me just go and change directory to my home directory. And if I type cat etc group, it will show me this information. But also, if I type groups, oh wait a minute, groups will show me as a user and the group that I belong to. So go ahead and try it yourself and see. It's going to tell you which groups you are actually, which group that you belong to. Now, one thing you should know that if you have the permission, if you are the root user, you will be able to create new groups. You will be able to remove groups, just like how you're able to remove users. And also you will be able to add new groups, and you're going to be able to update user groups if they are available. Okay, now that we're done talking about groups, user IDs, and what's permission in general, let's go ahead and try to have a look at permissions in general. And let me start with this. If I type ls, you'll see that here in this folder, my home folder, I have this file. Sorry, I have this element, and this element, and this element, and this element. All of them are located inside my home directory. Now, if I want to see details, just put L and press enter. I want you to pay attention to the colors code that's used here. This is an executable file. It simply means it's a program that could run. The blue color that you see here are directories. So I got a directory here and a directory here, or a folder, and this one here is a file, a text file in this case. So you can see here, those are all my files that are folders that are available inside my home directory. Now, our most important part here is that we're going to try to understand what is this part here. Let me highlight this part all the way here, and this, and this, and this. What these, again, the dashes, the R, the W, the X's, what do they mean? That's a very, very important concept that we're gonna talk about here. But before we jump into that, let's just go ahead. Yes, let's start with this. Number one, if you have a directory, you will start with a D that you see here. Okay? But if it's a file, you start with a dash. So now, by a look, even though if you don't know the color code and what does it mean, this should tell you that this is a file, this is a file, this is a directory, this is a directory, by the first character. Now, what else do we have? Sometimes you will find something called L, but we don't have it here. And it's a link. It's out of the scope of this chapter, so I'm not going to give you a headache with what does it mean. We also have sometimes C's, we have B's, we have N's. All of these characters are not what this chapter is concerned about. This chapter is only concerned with R, W, X, and the dashes, and the D's. Okay, so those are the characters that we need to understand what is the meaning of them. So when I type ls-l, show me the details in the form of a list, I am basically going to be focused on this side here. Now remember here, if it's a file, you start with a dash. If it's a directory, you start with a D. Okay, let's keep going. Now, the three characters that are very, very important is the R and the W and the X. R simply means read. It's a stand for read. And this simply means you can read the file. W stands for write, and simply means you can write the file. X means execute, and simply means you can execute the file. Now, I'm talking about this based on files. So you can read a file, you can write a file, you can execute a file. But how about directories? That's also very, very important to understand. Okay, and we're going to go through them one by one. So if you see a dash, not the first dash, like you see dashes like the one that you see here, simply means there's no permission. So there's no permission here, there's no permission here, there's no permission here. This one here is simply telling you there is a read permission, there's a write permission, and there's execute permission. Now, permission to who, this is what we're going to cover later. But at this point, it's very, very important to understand what is the meaning of those letters. Okay? Now remember here, R could be for a file, it could be for a directory. And you need to understand what's the difference between them. Reading a file simply means you can view the content of that file. Okay? But reading a directory simply means you can list the content of that directory. So, if you have R associated with the folder, that simply means when you're going to type ls, then you can list the content of the folder, what this folder simply contains. It's very, very important to understand those differences. So read for a file, you can read the content of the file. Read for a directory simply means you can list the content of the directory. Write to a file simply means you can modify the content of the file. You can open the file and change what's inside it. Write for a directory simply means you can create new directories or files. You can modify or delete files inside that directory. So for example, if this folder here has a W permission, that simply means you, and I'm talking about the person who has the permission, can create files, can modify files inside it, and can delete files inside it. So again, those small details are very, very important. Execute. If the file is executable, then if you have the X permission, then you can simply execute the file and run the program. Now, what does it mean to execute a directory? Well, it simply means you can get inside it, change the directory, go inside, go out. But if the execution of a file of a directory was not given, the permission for a file is not, the execution permission of a file is not given, that simply means if you want to access to it, change directory, you will not be able to do that. So those, again, very, very important to understand. R and W and X, they mean something for a file, and they simply mean something else for the directory. And boy, oh boy, do I like to ask those type of questions. Okay, so now we know what R stands for, what W stands for, and what X stands for. Now we need to ask this question. Why do I have three fields? If you think about it, I can break down what you see here into 4 fields to be specific. But let me just... I just want to, yep, that's, I'm just trying to follow the PowerPoint that I'm using here. So we got the read, the write, the execution. And now we are moving to, let me see here, is it not covered? Okay, yes. Let's move on and talk about those 4 fields that you see here. Let me just start from the X all the way to here. Now, the first field here, again, as I said, indicates if this is a file or it's a directory. That's easy. Now, you can see the rest of the fields. If you count them, you'll find 9 spaces. We break down these 9 spaces into 3 fields, and every single field will have 3 characters. This is the first group of characters. This is the second group of characters, and this is the third group of characters. Very, very important to pay attention. The first group of characters here presents the privilege or the permissions that are given to the owner and the user of the file. So, what is that supposed to mean? It simply means that the user or the owner of these files have the permission, let's say for this one, the my date, to read, to write, to execute. And for this one, the user, the owner of this file, has the permission to read and write and execute. Look at this one. This is mypro.py. The owner of this file has the permission to read, to write, but not to execute. Okay? Later I'm going to explain how do I change that if I have the permission to do that. Because I'm the owner, then I will be able to change it if I want to. Now, finally here, this folder, the owner can read, write, and execute this directory. And remember here, what does read represent for a directory, what W represent for write represent for a directory, and what execute represent for a directory? It's simply three commands, ls, and what is the other one? Modifying files, and the other one is to change directory and get inside and get out. Now, so that's the first group. What are those three groups? This here represent the permission that will be given to the group that the user belongs to. So I am a member in the faculty group, and simply all the faculties in this class, they have permission to do nothing with my classes, with my files here. They cannot read, they cannot write, they cannot execute because of these three dashes. As the owner of these files, I can give them permission if I want to. But by default, they don't have a permission to do anything. Now, the rest of it, the three characters, are simply permission given to everyone else, which simply means you. Okay? So everyone in this Linux operating system can, except the group people, can read it, can execute it, but they cannot write to it. So if you go and try to have access to any of these files, you'll be able to read it if you want to. You'll be able to execute it if you want to, but you will not be able to write on it. And for this one, my Python, this is a Python program, by the way, you can only read it, but you cannot modify it and you cannot execute it. Okay? So this permission system is extremely important to understand. What does each character represent? And it's very easy. The first character, it just simply indicates if this is a group or if it's a directory. The first three characters, the second three characters here represent the permission for the user, permission for the group, permission for others. And that's again simply what those three fields mean. The dot that you see at the end here is simply, again, as the book says, is to enhance the security of the system, and we simply are not going to go through it. Okay, so here we go. We got an idea about the permission. Now, the question is, how do I change and how do I modify the permission? Now, the idea here, there are many different ways that you can get the job done. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you my favorite one, which is the easiest one. And then after that, I will show you the other methods, and I'll let you decide which one of them you want to use. In my opinion, the method that I'm going to show you is the easiest one because it's a simple math that if you just understand what it is, you will be able to apply it in any situation that you have. The other methods relies on memorizing a lot of elements. So let me just go and show you my first and my favorite method of playing with permission. And for that purpose, I am simply going to be using the Paint, and I have a tablet here that I can actually use to explain the concept. So, number one, we know that we have 10 characters that are associated with a permission. We said the first character could be a dash or could be a D as for directory. Now, we're not going to focus on that. We simply have three groups. This is for the user, this is for the group, and this here is for the others. The idea here is if you want to actually present the permission, a 1 presents that you're given a permission, 0 presents no permission. Now we know those three is for the user, owner, those three is for the group, and this is for the others. And we also know that this is read, this is write, and this is execute. Read, write, execute, read, write, execute. Now what we're going to do, for example, if I want to give permission for the user to only write, I simply type 0 here, 1 here, and 0 here. If I want to give the group the permission to read and execute, I'll put 1 here, 0 here, and 1 here. If I want to give the user here the execution, the permission, to read and to write, but not to execute, I'll put 0. Okay? So read, write, X, read, write, X, read, write, X, I can present them like when they're going to be in the table, you're going to see them in the form of, for example, this one is going to look like this. Dash, W, dash, and then after that, R, dash, X, and then this is going to be R, W, dash. Okay? So this is when you type, if you have a file with this permission that I showed you here, it's going to look like this one here. Now, what does this, again, represent here? Those numbers represent here. I can replace all this, especially when it comes to the part where I'm going to change permission, into numbers. This one, for example, will be 2. This one here is going to be, oh, wait a minute, 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So this is going to be, wait a minute, this is 4, my bad. This is 1, 2, 4. So this is going to be 2. This is going to be 5. And this one is going to be 6. So this permission here that you see, the dash W, dash R, dash X, RW, dash, simply could be presented in a form of 2, 5, and 6. And this is my favorite method. When you see 2, 5, 6, I understand that 2 is 0, 1, 0, 5 is 1, 0, 1, 6 is 1, 1, 0, and I understand this is only, you can write, this is you can read and execute, and this one here, you can read and write, but you cannot execute. So this is again how permissions are simply presented. We can present them again using this technique. This is simply how it's going to look like, but also we can use numbers, and I am going to utilize numbers a lot. I'm just reading a text message. One sec. Okay, let's get back to Linux and let's see how this thing works. Now, so I hope this explanation here gave you an idea, and let me start a new file. And this time I'm going to tell you if the octal, let me see, yeah, the octal presentation of permission goes like this: 7, 3, 5. What is that supposed to mean? Simply means the user can read, can write, can execute, because this is 1, 1, 1, and again this is binary representation, so this is 1, this is 2, and this is 4. The summation of all of them will give you 7. 3, that simply means the user cannot read but can write and execute, because it's 1, 1, 0, and this is 1, this is 2. If you add them up together, it will give you 3. And for the others, it's 5. So it's 1, 0, 1. That simply means they can read and they can execute, but there is no writing. And here, there is no reading. Okay? So this one here, 7, 3, 5 permissions, simply read, write, execute, dash, write and execute, and then after that we got read, dash, execute. I don't know, how do I say this enough? You need to master this. Okay? Now, let's go back to the Linux that we have here, and let me try to change the permission, for example, to this file. Oh, let's try to change the permission for mypro.py and change the permission so the others, the group can read and can write without executing. Okay, so here's what we do. The command that we use, and let me just make sure that I'm not forgetting anything. Permission binary, I explained all this. Map the binary, I talked about all of this. Yeah, there's like a lot of slides that I'm just moving through that I just explained with that here. The command that we use to change permission for any file is called chmod, change mode. Okay? Change mode simply means I want to change the permission for a file. Now, since we're talking about this mypro.py, I have to put it at the end. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make the user, which is me, being able to read and write and execute. So I'll put 7. For the group, I want them to read and write without execute. So that is a 6. And for the others, I want them to not be able to do anything, only execute if that's, only execute, I'll just put 1. Let's see if I can do that. And actually, he didn't complain about anything. So let's go back in ls and pay attention to this one. Read, write, execute for the user. Read, write without execute for the group. And again, that's because of 6. And for the others, I want them only to be able to execute. You see how I changed the permission for it? Now, let me change the permission for myself, and let me show you, if I try to read it, what's going to happen. If I type cat, see, this is the content of it. It's telling me print test. Now, here's what I'm going to do. If I change the permission for it. So let me go back to the permission. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the permission to read out. So simply is going to be 1 and 2. So that's 3. So I can write, I can execute, but I cannot read. That doesn't make that much of sense. How can you write it if you cannot read it? Well, let's just go ahead and do this. Now if I go ls again, you will see that the R doesn't exist anymore here. And now if I type cat, look what happened. Permission denied. I don't have access to the file anymore. If I want to give you the ultimate access, which is again something is now recommended to do, 7777, and now if I go ls, you'll find that everybody can do whatever they want. And remember here, I am only able to do that because I am the user and the owner of the file. But if I'm trying to have access to a file that you created, probably I will not be able to do and get any of these done. Okay? So this is how we simply change the permission to go with it. Now, in addition to this technique, which is again, as I said, it's my favorite way, there's many different ways that we can change permissions on a file. Now remember here, using the numbers implies that it's more like you're wiping out the old permission that you have and you're starting a new permission set of permissions that's going to override the previous one. But there's a technique where you simply can, remember here, can change one of the settings and keep other settings as they are by using characters. Okay? First of all, whenever you want to deal with that, you have to specify, you go with CH mode, and then after that you have to specify, are you changing the mode for the user or the group or the others. So again, if it's a user, you use the character U. If you use the group, you use G. If it's other, you use the character A. And then after that, you decide, do you want to add reading permission? So you put a +R. And if you want to, and there's all, so you give permission to all of them. Now, let me just show you what do I mean by that, just to give you an idea. If I go back to my file again, and I'm going to change the permission in this case to 000. Now, if I go back to ls, you'll notice that no one has any permission here. Look what I can do. CH mode, and I will say all, okay, +R. So I'm changing R to be, oh, my bad. And I have to type the file name, so my program file. Now let me just make sure that I got this right. See here. Yep, it worked. Now let me just go ahead back to the ls, and you will notice that they all have the permission to read. Now let me go back to that same thing here. If I just go to user and change WR to W and X, and if I go back to ls, you will notice that I can now read, write, and execute. Now if I want to take writing away, I come here and type W. And now if I go back, you will notice that I cannot write anymore. Okay? And of course, this could be applied to many. If I go back here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to say +X, and I will put group and others. GO. And now you will notice that groups can execute and others can execute. So you need to know that we have U for users, G for groups, O for others, all. If you want to apply one thing for all of them, you follow that with a plus or minus about what you're trying to add, what you're trying to take out, and then you have the R and WX, and that's simply how it works. As I said, I prefer numbers, but if you feel more comfortable with this technique, then you be my guest, and it doesn't really matter which one of them you're simply going to be using. This will be the end of this video, which I think it's a little bit shorter than the first one, but file permission is one of the keys to understand Linux, and I hope I made it a little bit easier for you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys later.